The word hit me before I even saw her face. Why is that old leech here? We don't have space. It sliced through the morning air sharper than the ocean wind. I froze on the stone steps leading to my own front porch suitcase, still in hand. The keys I had carried for 25 years pressed between my fingers. The sun hadn't fully risen. The tide was quiet. The gulls were feeding near the pier, the same spot where Ben and I had once poured the first bag of cement for the deck. Now the house we'd built together echoed with loud pop music and laughter. 3 unfamiliar cars were crammed into my driveway, one of them blocking my vegetable patch. The rosemary bush I'd planted 10 years ago was flattened under a tire track. A small boy in neon swim trunks ran past me dripping juice from a plastic cup. He didn't even look up. From the terrace above, Melanie appeared wearing my gardening apron, the one embroidered with NL. My initials stitched in blue thread. Her hair was tied high, her phone in one hand, like a crown. She didn't hide her annoyance when she saw me. "Oh, you weren't supposed to be here till next month." "I wasn't supposed to need permission," I said quietly. Behind her, I counted at least 8 people at the outdoor table, all strangers. The smell of bacon and incense mixed in the morning breeze. Someone had hung a banner that said, "Mindful Coastal Retreat," across the porch beam. For a moment, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. Then I saw the brass wind chime I'd made from Ben's old fishing lures. It dangled in the same corner, as always shimmering against the sea light. No, this was my house. Melanie walked down the steps barefoot, holding a mug that clearly belonged to my set. "Eric said I could use the beach house for a few days. It's for my clients. They've already paid deposits. It's good exposure for the family." Her words dripped with entitlement. She moved as if the ground itself belonged to her. I looked around the deck chairs, scattered my irrigation timer, unplugged the soil in my planter boxes, cracked from overwatering. The careful balance I had maintained for years was gone in one weekend. "Good exposure," I repeated. "For whom?" she smirked. "You wouldn't understand. It's a digital thing." I stepped closer to the garden beds. The marigolds were trampled. My pruning shears, rusted and half buried in the dirt, caught the sun. I bent down, picked them up, and brushed the soil off the blade. My reflection blinked back at me from the metal. Older, yes, but steady. "Melanie, I said this house isn't a digital thing. It's real. It breathes." She rolled her eyes. "You can stay in town if you want. I'll make sure the cleaning crew restores everything after the retreat. It's only for a week." I could feel the pulse in my throat. "A week," I said. "And who gave you permission?" "Eric did. He's family. That makes it ours." Her tone was final. I looked at the sea instead of her. The horizon was calm, the same color as the day Ben died. "Family," I murmured. That word used to mean something. I lifted my suitcase again, but this time my hands were steady. I could feel the first seed of anger pressing into my chest, ready to grow. Melanie turned away before I could speak again. "I have guests arriving in 10 minutes, she said. "It's better if you don't make it awkward." Awkward. That was her word for everything that didn't fit her curated world. I stood on the deck surrounded by the chaos she called mindfulness. A diffuser hissed lavender mist over my workbench. Someone's yoga mat lay on the wooden floor where Ben and I had once stored the seed jars. A lavender diffuser hissed over my workbench, masking the earthy scent that once defined this place. The air reeked of polished stillness, not life. A woman inside laughed loudly. "Mel, this place is perfect. So authentic, I almost laughed myself." Authentic. Nothing about this was real anymore. When I turned back to Melanie, she was already posing for her camera, angling herself, so the ocean made the perfect backdrop. She shouted to the phone, "Welcome to our first Mindful Escape retreat, hosted at the Langford family's coastal home, where balance meets beauty." My jaw clenched. She had stolen not only my house, but the meaning of what I built. I spoke low calm, measured like an engineer, marking a fault line before the quake. Then, Let's hope the lesson you learn here lasts longer than your guests. Her smile faltered for half a second before returning to performance mode. You should rest, Nora. You're getting worked up over nothing. I nodded. You're right, I will rest. Just not here. I picked up the old shears again and folded them into my bag, a small reminder of what still belonged to me. As I walked down the gravel path toward my car, the wind shifted. The ocean smelled of iron and salt, like the taste of a cut healing. Behind me, laughter carried from the deck. They thought I was leaving defeated, but I was only measuring the damage. And every engineer knows, before rebuilding, you must first record the collapse. My name is Nora Langford, 68 years old. For 40 years I worked as an agricultural engineer, designing irrigation systems and restoring damaged soil across California's coast. I've seen floods, droughts, and storms destroy what people thought would last forever. But I also learned one truth that never failed me. When roots are deep enough, no storm can take them. And I was about to prove that again. The road stretched empty under the morning light. I drove south away from the house that no longer felt like mine. The old truck rattled against the coastal wind, carrying boxes of notebook soil samples and silence. The motel stood near a gas station, its sign flickering between vacancy and antsy. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner and salt. Room 12. One bed, one desk, one window facing the sea. I set my bag down and let the quiet settle. The results came instantly. There it was, a sleek website with ocean photos I had taken years ago. Melanie's voice played in the background, narrating about reconnecting with nature. Reconnect, I muttered. You'd have to be connected first. I scrolled down. Weekend package $600 per guest. 12 guests maximum. Fully booked. I did the math. 12 times $607,200. The next calculation came naturally. Garden repair $5,000 minimum. Furniture replacement maybe another $1,000. Soil restoration after heavy trampling $1,500 in labor and seed. Total damage exceeded what they earned. That irony almost made me smile. Numbers gave me clarity. They were pure, unforgiving, exact. I began listing them in the journal, each figure a quiet blade. Outside the sea stretched silver and wide. Gulls dove between waves, chasing invisible fish. From my window I saw the faint line where the sky met the horizon. I used to think that line meant freedom. Now it felt like a boundary I had to cross again, not with travel, but with action. I closed the laptop and poured a cup of motel coffee. It tasted metallic, almost like rust. The bitterness lingered, and yet it grounded me. On the small table beside me sat a pot of imitation plants, plastic, perfectly green, untouched by decay. I traced one leaf with my finger. No scent. No life. That was the difference between what I built and what they used. Ben once told me, "Real things rust, Nora. That's how you know they lived." His voice echoed now like wind through copper pipes. I looked at my hands, the faint calluses that never faded. Soil had shaped me, and I was done letting thieves stand on ground I once nurtured. Night arrived early along the coast. I turned off the lamp and lay back on the stiff motel bed. The ceiling fan whirred unevenly, its rhythm off, by half a beat. Somewhere beneath that sound, I heard the soft pulse of resolve. Quiet revenge doesn't roar. It roots, it grows. Slow and deliberate like rosemary, pushing through dry soil. In my notebook, I wrote one last entry before sleep claimed me. The pen left a dark streak at the end of the word. The ink bled slightly like soil after rain. I closed the journal and placed it under my pillow. Tomorrow I would begin my next experiment, one built on justice, not anger. And this time, the variables were human. The next morning I returned to the house. I told myself it was only to pick up my medication, but the truth was heavier than that. I needed to see the damage with my own eyes. The driveway was crowded again. New cars, different faces. Someone had parked on the rosemary hedge. The stems were broken, their scent sharp and defensive in the air. I unlocked the back door quietly. The house smelled unfamiliar. Lavender candles burned where my soil samples used to be. Their sweet smoke covered the natural scent of damp earth. I stepped into the kitchen. My workbench was gone. In its place stood a white table lined with spa towels and herbal oils. A diffuser hissed next to my old coffee maker. The hum of it felt almost mocking. On the counter, my collection of small glass jars had been emptied. Each one once held a different type of soil from the coastal ridge. Now they were filled with colored sand, labeled mindfulness energy. My throat tightened. It wasn't just invasion, it was erasure. In the living room, sunlight bounced off the polished floor. The shelves were half empty. The family photo from Ben's retirement party was missing. So was the brass compass he had carried during his years in the Navy. I found the spot where his favorite armchair used to sit. The imprint on the floor still marked its place like a ghost. In that hollow space, someone had set up a yoga mat and incense burner. Footsteps sounded from above. I froze. Then I heard it, the slow, rhythmic breathing of someone asleep. I climbed the stairs quietly, the old wood creaking under my weight. My bedroom door was open. Inside, a woman I had never met lay across my bed. Melanie's mother. Her hair was rolled in pink curlers. A silk robe shimmered under the morning light. She snored softly, a sleep mask covering her eyes. On the dresser beside her were my jewelry boxes, opened and rearranged. A note in messy handwriting read, "Borrowed the pearls for dinner." The air felt too thin to breathe. I turned and walked out before the rage could speak for me. My steps were measured, each one precise. The way you move when you know every inch of the ground. In the hallway, the door to the study was half shut. I pushed it open slowly. My desk had been moved. Papers stacked, wrong drawers half open. A pile of retreat brochures sat on top of my ledgers. On the floor lay one of Ben's folders, its label smeared but legible, deed and estate documents. I knelt down and gathered the pages one by one. Most were blank photocopies, but near the bottom, something stopped me. A property transfer form printed, signed, and notarized. At least, that's how it looked at first. Then I saw my signature, or what was supposed to be mine. The strokes were smooth, too perfect. No hesitation, no small tremor from the arthritis in my right hand. A forgery. I turned the page and found another document clipped behind it, a medical evaluation. The header read, "Cognitive Impairment Screening. Preliminary." The date was last week. The diagnosis section said, "Possible early dementia symptoms. Recommend capacity assessment." At the bottom was a fake doctor's signature. The ink had bled into the paper like a wound. I stared at it until the letters blurred. My pulse pounded so loud I could hear it in my teeth. I flipped the paper over. A handwritten note in blue ink sprawled across the back. "Once Mom is declared unfit, the house transfers clean." I felt my body go still, the kind of stillness that comes before an earthquake. The ink from that forged signature bled across the page like a wound. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was design, an erasure mapped line by line. I sat down at the desk. The chair creaked, but my breathing steadied. I studied each page as if it were a field sample. Date, texture, consistency, contamination. Evidence never lies. I opened my phone camera and took pictures, front and back, corner to corner. Then I slipped the forged papers into my bag. They would not stay here another night. The clock on the wall ticked faintly. Every sound felt magnified. Downstairs, someone laughed. Melanie's voice light, careless, confident. The guests loved breakfast. This place photographs so well. I looked around the study one last time. Every inch of it carried Ben's touch. The books we read together, the drawings he made of irrigation lines, the old pencil with his bite marks. And now, beneath all that history, someone was writing a new script with my name erased. I touched the corner of his blueprint, the one we'd drawn together 25 years ago. A smudge of rust marked the edge where his wrench had once rested. That same rust now coated my heart, slow and inevitable. I left through the back door. The rosemary hedge brushed against my leg as I passed. Half of it was crushed, but one branch still stood upright, green and defiant. I plucked a small stem and held it to my nose. Its scent was sharp alive. Ben once said rosemary grows stronger after being cut. Maybe people do too. As I walked toward the car, I whispered what I hadn't said aloud in years. I whispered to the sea voice, steady against the wind. You picked the wrong woman to underestimate. The wind carried the words out to the sea, scattering them like seeds. In the distance, the tide began to rise, and somewhere beneath the calm surface, the first current of justice began to turn. The morning air smelled of metal and salt. I drove to the overlook above the house and parked under the pine trees. From the ridge, everything was visible. Cars lined the drive. Banners fluttered. Strangers walked barefoot across my lawn, each step pressing deeper than they knew. I took out my phone and switched to the camera. Click. Timestamp 7:42 a.m. Click. The broken irrigation pipe near the gate. Click. A woman doing yoga on the deck where Ben and I once had dinner by candlelight. Evidence, not emotion. That was the rule. I had lived my entire life by measurements and records. Today would be no different. I zoomed in on the terrace. Melanie was on a call, gesturing dramatically, her voice rising above the wind. I turned on the recorder. Yes, it's fully booked, she said. 12 guests, 600 each. The old house finally earns its keep. My fingers clenched around the phone. She tilted her phone toward the ocean voice, rising for the camera. Sunlight glinted off her bracelet, as if pride itself had turned metallic. She laughed as if my life's work were a punchline. Click. Photo of her with the phone. Audio saved. Data collected. I moved through the property's perimeter like a surveyor tracing an invisible line. Each image, each note, was a data point in a greater equation. The pattern of betrayal had to be quantified before it could be reversed. When I reached the mailbox, I found a stack of envelopes. The top one was from the county tax office, unopened. Inside, the latest property tax receipt, paid by me in full 3 weeks ago. Another variable. Click. Photo. The truth would be undeniable once graphed. I opened my notebook and wrote in block letters, experiment title, The Erosion of Trust. Observation number 1, unauthorized occupancy. Observation number 2, attempted asset transfer. Observation number 3, subject displays arrogance consistent with ignorance. I smiled slightly. Ben used to tease me about labeling everything like a research project. But structure was the only thing that kept chaos from winning. By noon, I had moved my command post to a cafe near the marina. The place smelled of roasted beans and sunscreen. I ordered black coffee and opened my laptop. Melanie's Instagram was public. The latest post stopped my breath. A panoramic photo of my deck, the sea shining behind it. Caption, hosting a $12,000 retreat at our family's coastal villa. So grateful for abundance. Our family's villa. The words were acid on the screen. Click. Screenshot saved. Timestamp added. Metadata secured. I uploaded all images to a private drive labeled Project Restoration, a fitting title. Next, I drove to the bank. The glass doors reflected my face, calm but sharpened. Inside, the air was cool and exact, the kind of place where numbers never lie. Mr. Reynolds, the branch manager, looked up and smiled. Mrs. Langford, I haven't seen you in months. How's retirement? I placed my folder on the desk. Active. I need to verify my accounts and freeze external access immediately. He frowned. Has there been an attempt to breach them? Not yet. But I prefer prevention over post-mortem analysis. He typed rapidly, checking the records. All accounts are under your sole name. No authorized co-signers. Would you like to add a security phrase? Yes. Use this. I slid a note across the table. He read it and smiled faintly. Deep roots never rust. He entered it into the system. When he looked up, his expression softened. Ben would be proud, you know. You've always been the most disciplined client I have. Discipline is how you outlive storms, I said quietly. I left the bank with printed confirmations in hand, tangible proof of sovereignty. The paper felt heavier than it should, like armor forged from years of labor. In the parking lot, I stood still for a moment, watching seagulls circle above the masts. I had gathered my variables. Now it was time to introduce a catalyst. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Vivian Harlow. Attorney. Former roommate. We hadn't spoken in years, but she was the kind of friend who didn't need small talk. The phone rang twice, then a familiar voice, steady, amused. Nora Langford. If you're calling, it must be serious. You sound like someone about to publish a dangerous paper. Close, I said. Someone falsified my signature and turned my home into a profit center. Family. Unfortunately. Silence stretched between us. I see, she said quietly. What do you need? Guidance, I answered. And maybe a controlled detonation. Vivian laughed softly. Still a scientist to the bone. Always. But this time the experiment is human behavior. I heard her chair creak as she leaned forward. All right, send me everything you have, photos, documents, audio receipts. I'll build a case file tonight. No billing, I said. I'll pay in full. She hesitated. You forget who you're talking to. This one's on me for friendship and justice. Vivian's tone dropped to that low, steady warmth I remembered from late nights in the campus lab, where logic was our only light in the lab, back when we believed logic could fix anything. Maybe it still could. Before hanging up, she asked, How are you holding up? I'm treating this like soil restoration, I said. Explain. When the ground's been poisoned, you don't curse the field. You test, document, and begin the slow work of renewal. Vivian was quiet for a beat. Then, that's not vengeance, Nora. That's precision. Exactly, I said. I'm done cultivating patience. It's time to harvest accountability. The line went silent, then a low chuckle. Send me everything. And Nora, yes. Make sure your phone is recording when justice sprouts. I smiled as I ended the call. Outside, the tide was rising. Waves reached the parking lot one breath at a time. Rhythmic, patient, relentless. Back in the car, I opened my notebook again. On a fresh page, I wrote, Phase 1, complete. Data secured. Variables stable. Next step, exposure under sunlight. I closed the notebook and looked toward the horizon. The sea shimmered like polished glass. In its reflection, I saw not an old widow, but a woman recalibrating her equation. The sea shimmered like cracked earth waiting for rain. Justice, I knew, demanded the same pressure timing and the right season to bloom, and I was ready to tend this field until every root of deceit was pulled clean. The rain began before sunrise, thin, deliberate drops, the kind that engineers call calibration rain, soft, steady, precise. I took it as a sign. The storm was approaching, and nature was running its final test. I spread the documents across the motel desk. Police report forms, property deeds, printed screenshots, everything in neat alignment. Evidence doesn't lie when ordered correctly. The first task, trespassing report. I called the local sheriff's office, voice steady. This is Mrs. Nora Langford. I need to file a report for illegal entry and property damage. The deputy on the line sounded young, uncertain. Do you know the suspects, ma'am? Yes. My daughter-in-law and her guests. A pause, then a softer tone. I'm sorry, ma'am. Family matters are always hard. Only if you mistake theft for affection, I said. At 8:45 a.m., I arrived at the station. The scent of wet uniforms and coffee filled the air. I handed over the printed photos one by one, time-stamped, labeled and catalogued. The officer raised his brows. You're thorough. I'm an engineer, I replied. We don't build on assumptions. He nodded, tapping the keyboard. Case number 4276. You'll receive updates by email. Thank you. I'll attach financial documentation soon. Back at the motel, I made coffee so strong it felt medicinal. I reviewed each photo again, highlighting items of loss. Broken irrigation valve, $180. Damaged soil sensors, $720. Lost heirlooms priceless, but listed anyway. The arithmetic of betrayal demanded numbers. Then came the second task proof of mind. The fake dementia report had to be erased by something official. I dialed Dr. Patel's office. He had been Ben's physician and mine for 15 years. Reliable. Honest. Dr. Patel, it's Nora. I need a notarized mental competency certificate. A pause. Then his calm voice. Of course, Nora. Are you in trouble? Not trouble. Documentation. He chuckled. You always loved paperwork more than panic. Paperwork wins longer battles. He scheduled me for noon. I arrived early wearing my field jacket and boots still stained from the farm project. His nurse led me in with a smile. Dr. Patel looked up from his clipboard. Still working, I see. Still learning, I said. He tested my reflexes, asked questions, reviewed my memory and coordination. Who's the governor of California? Still the one who promises drought reform, I answered dryly. He smiled. And what's 7 times 963? Excellent. I'll sign the evaluation and have it notarized by our clinic's notary today. He looked at me a long moment. You're not losing memory, Nora. You're losing patience. That's accurate, I said. The certificate gleamed in fresh ink. At the bottom, Dr. Patel's note read, Patient demonstrates full cognitive function and decision-making capacity. Proof of mind, sealed and legal. One less weapon in their arsenal. I left his office into the drizzle rain, tapping on the folder like applause. I imagined Melanie's face when this document arrived in court. I could almost hear the silence that would follow. At 3:00 p.m., I began the third task, financial tracking. The bank's online portal glowed like a clean slate. Every transaction from the last 6 months, cross-referenced, labeled filed. Income, taxes, pension, savings. No anomalies, no missing funds. I printed the full statement and signed each page. Each signature was a declaration I am here, present, competent, accountable. By late afternoon, the motel room looked like a miniature command center. Folders labeled evidence property, finances medical. Ben's photo stood on the nightstand, half lit by the lamp. He used to say, preparation is peace. Now I understood he meant something deeper. I was sealing my piece with ink and proof. The phone rang just as I finished labeling the last envelope. The screen showed Eric's name. For a moment, my pulse hesitated, old reflex. I pressed accept. Mom. His voice was casual, falsely calm. I heard you've been making a big deal about the house. I'm addressing a legal matter, I said evenly. He sighed, the kind of exhale people use when they think they're reasonable. Mum, don't overreact. It's just family using space. The word space hung in the air like static. Space, I repeated. Yeah. Melanie didn't mean to upset you. It's just temporary. You always talk about sharing resources. Resources, I said. Interesting choice of words. He laughed nervously. Come on, Mum. Let's not make this ugly. They're just trying to host something nice. Everyone benefits. I stared at the folders on the desk. Paper, proof, boundaries. Eric, I said quietly, do you know how much your wife charged per guest? He hesitated. What? 12 people, 600 each, $7,200. That's not. It's business then. Not family. Silence. Then his voice sharper now. You can't drag us to court. That's insane. I can, I said, and I will. Mum, please. No. My tone was calm, final. You said it's just space. Then you can measure the cost of your space in court. The silence on the other end stretched long and heavy. I could hear him breathing shallow, uncertain. Then a quiet click. Call ended. For a long time I sat still. The rain outside had stopped. The air smelled clean rinsed. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Emotional midpoint reached. No more appeasement. Control restored through documentation." I underlined the last line twice. The engineer in me felt the balance shift. The field was mapped, the data collected, the structure stable. Now came the next phase: execution. I slid all folders into a waterproof bag. The zippers clicked shut like the final locks of a vault. I turned off the lamp and stood by the window. The horizon glowed faint orange behind the clouds. Somewhere beyond that light, my son was pacing, realizing that his mother wasn't backing down. Justice would not arrive in noise or rage. It would come in documents, notarized, numbered, and unstoppable. Ben's voice echoed in my memory. Every storm begins with quiet air. I looked down at the folders, my instruments of truth. The calm before paperwork, I whispered. And for the first time in weeks, I felt steady. The morning was sharper than usual, the kind of cold that carries purpose. I tightened my coat and checked my folder one last time. Inside were the orders signed and stamped by Judge Elkins at dawn. Temporary possession reinstated. No one, not even family, could occupy my property without consent. Vivian met me outside the courthouse, her expression calm but alert. Beside her stood Deputy Cortez, a broad man with the quiet authority of someone who has seen too much and speaks only when needed. He nodded politely. "Mrs. Langford, we'll go in together. Keep your phone recording, all right?" I raised my phone, the red light blinking. Already on. The drive back to the coast felt longer than before. Fields of dry grass blurred past the kind I used to test for erosion. It reminded me that even the strongest soil weakens if neglected. So do families. When the sea came into view, my pulse steadied. The air smelled of salt rosemary and something else trespass. My house stood at the end of the lane, its windows open, curtains fluttering like flags of mockery. Cortez parked at the curb. Vivian adjusted her jacket, slipped the court order into a leather binder, and said, "Once we serve this, they'll have 48 hours to vacate. No exceptions." "Good," I said. "Let's make it clear." We walked down the gravel path. My shoes crushed seashells, the same ones Ben and I used to collect along this shore. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Music spilled out loud, synthetic, indifferent. Melanie's voice followed, shrill and theatrical. When she saw us, her expression turned from surprise to fury. "What is this?" she demanded, lifting her phone. "Why are there police here?" She started recording immediately, angling the camera to her best side. "You can't do this. It's family property," Vivian spoke evenly. "Ma'am, by order of the Superior Court of Monterey County, this property is under the legal ownership of Mrs. Nora Langford. You and your guests are hereby notified to vacate within 48 hours. Melanie's grip on the phone trembled. "Court order. Are you serious? We're family." I looked straight at her. "Then your family can pay for it like everyone else." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind her, one of the guests whispered, "Should we pack?" The room felt heavier, thick with the smell of fear and scented candles. I scanned the space, the displaced furniture, the trampled rug, the missing vases. My rosemary plant sat wilted in a plastic bucket near the window, roots exposed, soil drying. Deputy Cortez stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'll need the names of everyone staying here." Melanie's voice broke. "This is insane." Eric said it was fine. He said she wouldn't care. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to put that statement in writing?" Melanie's defiance cracked. Her mother appeared from the hallway, still in a robe, eyes wide and uncertain. "What's happening?" she whispered. "What's happening," I said quietly, "is documentation." I walked past them toward my office. The desk drawers had been emptied, papers scattered across the floor like confetti from someone else's celebration. Among them, I found one of my soil reports, crumpled wine-stained, still bearing my initials. I smoothed it gently, the way you might touch an old photograph. Proof of roots. From behind me, I heard tires screech. Eric. He entered the house, half running, half panicking. "Mom, what the hell is this?" He looked at the deputy, then at Vivian, then at me. "Why are you doing this? You're humiliating us." I turned, slowly meeting his eyes. "Am I? Or am I teaching you what accountability looks like?" He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Melanie told me it was just a short-term thing. We were using it for exposure. You always said this house should bring people together." I held up the folder in my hand. "This," I said softly, opening it. "This is what you call exposure." I laid the forged property transfer forms on the table. His signature, his digital signature, sprawled across the bottom of each page, the fake medical evaluation attached neatly to the last. For a moment he didn't move. The sound of the ocean filled the silence through the open door. He blinked once, then again, as if hoping the papers would vanish. I didn't sign that, he said, voice breaking. "Your e-signature system, your IP address, your date stamp," Vivian replied. "All verifiable." Cortez nodded. "We already confirmed it, sir." Eric's face lost color. His hands dropped to his sides. He looked at Melanie. "You did this." Her lips quivered. "I just wanted stability." "You said I said nothing like this." Their argument spiraled into fragments, accusation, denial, blame. I stood still, watching, silent as tidewater. Then I said quietly but firmly, "Eric, even roots rot when they grow in poisoned soil." He stopped talking. The room froze around the sentence. Vivian closed the folder, sealing it with a soft click. Cortez broke the silence. "Notice has been served. You'll need to vacate within 48 hours. Any personal belongings left behind after that will be documented and removed." Melanie's shoulders slumped. Eric looked smaller than I remembered. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I turned to Vivian. "Can we make sure the locks are changed once they're out?" "Already in process," she said. "A locksmith will arrive tomorrow." As we stepped outside, the sea breeze hit my face. The salt stung, but it felt clean. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, panic doors slamming, the sound of collapse. Vivian glanced at me. "You handled that better than most would. I've spent decades stabilizing land that others destroyed," I said. "People are no different." She smiled faintly. "Justice through geology." "I like it." Cortez handed me a copy of the order. "Mom, you'll get a court hearing next week. Keep this version safe." "I keep everything safe," I said. We walked to the car in silence. The light had shifted gold on the horizon, silver on the roof. Each step felt measured, deliberate, like marking coordinates on a reclaimed map. When we reached the gate, I turned for one last look. Through the open door, I saw my house, chaotic, violated, but still standing. Its foundation hadn't cracked. Neither had mine. Vivian opened the car door and said quietly, "This is the turning point. Nora. From here on, they'll start realizing what they lost." "They already did," I said, watching the waves break against the shore. "They just don't know it yet." The breeze lifted my hair, carrying the scent of rosemary and sea salt, the first signs of cleansing. I pressed the folder to my chest. Inside it lay every fact, every number, every root that had survived. And as the tide rolled in, I felt something shift deep beneath the surface, not revenge, but restoration. Justice was no longer a theory, it was in motion. The sky was a pale gray when I left the motel, that kind of gray that feels like waiting, not empty, just holding its breath. I drove in silence, the folder of court papers resting on the passenger seat. It was heavier than it looked. Justice always is. Vivian's car followed behind mine. Deputy Cortez rode with her, his presence solid and steady, like an anchor in a storm. We didn't speak much when we met outside the courthouse. There was nothing left to say. By the time we reached the coast, the sea had turned restless. Waves crashed hard against the rocks, spraying salt into the wind. My house appeared in the distance, familiar yet foreign, a place I knew by heart, now occupied by strangers. Cortez parked by the mailbox. He checked the folder in his hand. Court orders, valid for 48 hours, Mrs. Langford. We'll serve it clean. Good, I said. Let's do it properly. We walked together down the gravel path. Every step echoed against the damp earth. I could smell rosemary from the broken planter near the fence. The same bush I had planted 25 years ago with Ben. Its roots still clung to life. Music thudded from inside the house, loud, careless. Voices overlapped laughter too easy to be innocent. Vivian adjusted her jacket and looked at me. Remember, stay calm. Let me speak first. I always do, I said. When the front door opened, Melanie stood there, her phone already raised like a weapon. Her face shifted first, surprise then fury. What are you doing here? She snapped. Why are you bringing cops into family business? Cortez held up the order. Ma'am, this property belongs solely to Mrs. Langford. By court authorization, you and your guests must vacate within 48 hours. Melanie's laugh was sharp and nervous. You can't do this. It's family property. I looked at her calmly. Then your family can pay for it, like everyone else. Her phone wavered in her hand. For the first time I saw fear behind her defiance. She turned to her friends. She's bluffing. She can't kick us out. Vivian stepped forward, voice even but cutting. The sheriff's department doesn't issue bluffs, Mrs. Langford. You're now formally served. She placed the papers on the table. The sound of the folder snapping open cut through the room like glass breaking. Melanie's mother emerged from the hallway, clutching a coffee mug. What's going on? Melanie's voice cracked. She's trying to steal the house. I stared at her, at the audacity, the projection. This house was never for sale, I said. Only borrowed by thieves who mistook kindness for weakness. The words hung there, heavy and cold. Cortez began documenting the room with his body camera. The guests shifted uncomfortably, collecting their things in silence. Then I saw it. My living room rearranged beyond recognition. My blue ceramic vases were gone. The framed wedding photo was missing from the mantel. The rug I bought in Santa Fe lay soaked in spilled wine. Every detail felt like a fingerprint of disrespect. I took a breath, forcing the anger into focus, like a lens tightening. Emotion was a tool, not a weapon. Then the sound of tires screeching outside. Eric's car. He slammed the door and rushed up the porch. His voice reached me before his face did. Mum, what's going on here? When he entered the room, fell into a strange stillness. He looked from me to the deputy, then to Melanie. What are you doing? What am I doing? I asked softly. You tell me, Eric. He blinked, confused. Melanie said you were overreacting, that you're trying to take legal action against us. This is crazy. Crazy, I said, walking to the table. Is that what you call evidence? Now I opened the folder and spread the papers across the wood. The forged property transfer, the falsified dementia evaluation, and his electronic signature, neat, identical, traceable. He froze. Color drained from his face. That's not mine, he said, voice trembling. Vivian spoke firmly. It was submitted through your verified IP address, Eric. Digital timestamp confirmed. Cortez added, forgery falls under criminal statute. You might want to read before denying. Eric turned to Melanie. Tell me you didn't. She cut him off. You said it would make things easier. You said your mum wouldn't even notice. I said she'd never agree to sell. Same difference, she screamed. Their shouting cracked through the walls like thunder. Cortez raised a hand. Enough. We're not mediating a domestic argument. The court order stands. Melanie's breathing quickened. She turned her camera back on me. You think you can just ruin our lives? I looked at her, voice low and steady. I'm not ruining them, Melanie. I'm recording them. She stepped back, eyes flashing, with something between rage and shame. Her voice broke into a scream. You're evil. You're trying to destroy your own family. I turned slightly toward Eric. Family, I repeated, a word that used to mean roots. Now it's just the name people hide behind when they steal. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. His eyes were wet, not from guilt, yet only from fear. I placed one hand flat on the table next to the forged pages. Eric, I said quietly, even roots rot when they grow in poisoned soil. The room went silent. Vivian closed the folder with deliberate care. Cortez's pen scratched across his notepad, marking the time and date. Melanie looked between us, her face pale, her voice reduced to whispers. What happens now? Vivian answered, professional but merciless. You have 48 hours to leave. If you refuse, the court will authorize physical removal and damages. I recommend packing. Melanie's mother began gathering clothes into a bag. The guests slipped out quietly, like shadows, realizing they no longer belonged. Eric stood frozen, staring at the papers he once thought would never surface. Cortez handed me a carbon copy of the served notice. Keep this for your records, ma'am. Thank you, I said, folding it carefully into my folder. Vivian looked around the room at the remnants of luxury, gone stale at the scented candles now flickering out. People think justice is dramatic, she said softly. It's usually this quiet. Quiet is stronger, I replied. It doesn't need applause. We walked toward the door. Behind us I heard a faint sob, then the slam of a bedroom door. The echo followed us outside. The sea wind hit my face cold and clean. I could smell salt soil and the faint trace of rosemary still clinging to the planter. It had survived more than they ever could. Vivian turned to me as we reached the car. That line you gave him about roots that was brutal. It was accurate, I said. She smiled faintly. You don't miss. Cortez opened the passenger door for me. Mom, you did good today. Not everyone can stay composed in a storm like that. I nodded. Field engineers learn early storms don't scare you when you've built the foundation right. As we drove away, I looked at the house one last time through the side mirror. Its silhouette stood firm against the waves, stripped of noise, stripped of deceit. It wasn't over, but the soil was clean again, ready for something honest to grow. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim reclaiming her home. I felt like a scientist reclaiming her experiment. Justice was in motion now. Not loud, not fast, but precise. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish, a mix of ink disinfectant and quiet tension. I sat beside Vivian at the long oak table, my folder resting in front of me like armor. Across the aisle, Melanie adjusted her silk blouse, trying to look composed. Eric sat 2 seats away from her jaw, tight eyes on the floor. The bailiff's voice echoed through the chamber. All rise. We stood as Judge Elkins entered, a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a voice that wasted no time. She nodded once. Case number 42176. Langford versus Langford. The irony of that title, family against family, settled like dust in the air. Vivian leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "Steady. She respects order." "I was born in it," I replied. The judge gestured for everyone to sit. She flipped through a stack of pages, skimming, marking, weighing. "Mrs. Langford," she said, glancing up at me, "you're claiming damages totaling $50,000. Please proceed." Vivian stood. Her voice was smooth, measured, deliberate, the tone of someone who understood that facts are sharper than emotion. "Your Honor, this case concerns forged property transfer documents, fraudulent financial activity, and unauthorized occupation of my client's home." She handed over 3 binders, each labeled color-coded and chronologically tabbed. Judge Elkins adjusted her glasses. "Proceed with evidence." Vivian began with precision. Exhibit A, forged property transfer, signed electronically under the defendant's household IP address. She held up the paper signature, glowing under projection light. Exhibit B, fabricated medical evaluation, intended to declare the plaintiff legally incompetent. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. And Exhibit C, bank access attempt, blocked by the institution after the plaintiff's security alert. Melanie shifted in her seat. Her fingers fidgeted with her phone, though no amount of scrolling could change the facts projected above her. Vivian continued, "The property in question has been independently appraised at $310,000. The damage to furnishings and irrigation totals $8,700. Combined with legal fees and emotional distress, the claim stands at exactly $50,000. The judge nodded, writing something down. Defense Melanie's lawyer, a young man in a grey suit that fit too tightly, rose. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this was a misunderstanding between family members." "My client," the judge interrupted, her tone dry. "A misunderstanding that included forged government documents," he stammered. "She was under emotional pressure. She believed the property was intended for joint use." Vivian's eyebrow lifted. "Belief doesn't authorize theft, counselor." The courtroom chuckled softly. Melanie's cheeks reddened. She whispered something to Eric, but he didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if hoping stillness could erase his name from the record. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Langford, would you like to make a statement?" I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my voice did not. "No statement, Your Honor. Just documentation." I handed the judge the final folder. Inside were photographs, time-stamped, annotated, meticulous. Photo 1, my front yard littered with beer cans. Photo 2, Melanie on the terrace, holding her phone, smiling during her live stream. Photo 3, screenshot from her Instagram, hosting a $12,000 retreat at our family's coastal villa. The judge flipped through the pages in silence. Each image landed like a hammer. Vivian finished the presentation with composure. "Your Honor, my client has worked her entire life as an agricultural engineer. She understands systems documentation and data. She has treated this betrayal with the same precision she used to restore California soil. What she presents today isn't vengeance. It's verification." The judge's eyes softened slightly, then sharpened again. "Understood. Thank you, Ms. Harlow." Melanie's lawyer tried again. "Your Honor, if I may." But the judge had already turned to Melanie. "Mrs. Langford, you're an online personality, correct?" Melanie nodded weakly. "Yes, I run a wellness brand." "Are you aware that forging legal documents is a felony, not a lifestyle choice?" Laughter broke out in the back row before the bailiff silenced it. Melanie's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to build something for us." "By stealing from your husband's mother?" the judge asked flatly. Tears formed mascara streaking her cheeks. Eric shifted, finally speaking. "She said it was for business, Mom. I swear I didn't know she filed anything official." I looked at him, not angry, not pitying, simply steady. "Eric," I said quietly, "you always knew what honesty looked like. You just chose convenience instead." He lowered his eyes. His lawyer didn't move. The judge leaned back, sighing. "Enough." She picked up her pen, tapping it twice against the desk. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Nora Langford." Melanie gasped. Judge Elkins continued, voice firm and unflinching. "The defendants are ordered to vacate the property immediately. Restitution of $50,000 is to be paid within 30 days. Additionally, a permanent restraining order is issued prohibiting contact or entry onto the plaintiff's property." The words landed like thunder. Melanie's head dropped into her hands. Eric froze. The courtroom went completely still, except for the judge's pen scratching across the page. "Case closed," she said. The gavel struck once. The sound was final. Reporters near the door whispered as they stepped out. Within hours, headlines would flood local news feeds. Influencer accused of defrauding mother-in-law during $12,000 retreat. Wellness brand under investigation for property fraud. By the time I walked outside, her empire of curated sunlight was already crumbling. The phone she clung to had turned into her loudest witness. Screenshots spread faster than apologies ever could. Vivian walked beside me down the courthouse steps. "That went smoother than most trials I've seen," she said. "It wasn't a trial," I replied. "It was a soil test." She smiled. "And the results contaminated, but containable." Cortez waited by the car papers in hand. "Congratulations, ma'am. Justice served, justice documented," I corrected. "It's never about winning. It's about recording truth." He nodded, then tipped his hat. As I turned to leave, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, reflecting off the courthouse windows. The light was sharp, almost surgical. I adjusted my glasses, the reflection catching the glass for a moment, clear, unwavering. Behind me, the world buzzed with gossip and headlines, but I stayed still, calm as the tide. Ben once told me, the loudest victories are often the quietest moments afterward. He was right. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to speak. I had already said everything that mattered in paperwork, in proof, in patience. I took one last look at the courthouse doors. Somewhere inside, Melanie was crying into her hands, finally learning the lesson money couldn't buy. $50,000. The cost of arrogance. The price of underestimating an old engineer who understood structure better than sympathy. As I walked toward the car, I whispered to myself, "The soil is clean again." And this time I knew it would stay that way. The sound of gravel under tires reached me before I saw the car. Even from the porch, I recognized the engine. Hesitant, familiar, guilty. Eric's sedan slowed near the gate headlights, cutting through the fog, like a man searching for courage. I didn't move. The morning air carried salt from the sea, and the faint scent of rosemary from the garden I'd begun restoring. The house was mine again, silent and whole, except for the unfinished conversation waiting beyond the fence. He stepped out, shoulders hunched, hands buried in his jacket pockets. No arrogance, no anger, only exhaustion. He stood on the other side of the gate, unsure whether to enter. "Mom," he called softly. I didn't answer. He tried again. I didn't know she'd go that far. His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment I heard the boy he used to be, the one who brought me seashells after storms and asked endless questions about how roots held trees upright. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who had mistaken silence for consent. I walked closer, the gravel crunching under my boots. "You didn't stop her either." He flinched. Rain clouds gathered over the horizon, darkening the sky to the same color as his regret. "I tried," he said. "She said it was for us, for the business." I didn't think. "No," I interrupted. "You didn't." The wind lifted the edge of my scarf. He looked older than his years. Eyes, red shirt, wrinkled guilt etched into every line of his face. I lost everything he said. Her brand's gone. My job too. People talk. They think I was part of it. "Were you?" He swallowed hard. I signed something I didn't read. I trusted her. I exhaled slowly. Trust. The most fragile structure ever built. Easier to design bridges that hold steel than bonds that hold truth. He gripped the gate with both hands. "I know I failed you, but I can fix it. I'll pay you back. I'll rebuild the house if you want." I looked at the walls behind me, already freshly painted, clean, steady. "It's already rebuilt," I said quietly. His hands slipped from the metal. He nodded, eyes wet. "Then what do I do now?" I thought of Ben, his steady patience, the way he used to handle broken tools, not by discarding them, but by setting them aside until the rust softened enough to clean. He never rushed repair. Neither would I. "Forgiveness," I said, "is not soil. You can till on command. It needs time. And rain." He looked down, shoulders trembling. "I'll wait then." "Good," I said. That's the first honest thing you've planted in years. We stood there, separated by iron and memory. The silence between us was neither cruel nor kind, just necessary. He turned after a while, walking back to the car without another word. When the engine started, I felt something shift, not closure, but equilibrium. I locked the gate and turned toward the house. The locksmith had finished that morning, leaving the new keys on a hook near the door. The metal was cool against my palm, the shape unfamiliar but promising. Every lock is a line of defense, but also a line of peace. Inside, the air smelled of lemon oil and clean wood. I'd spent the last 2 days scrubbing the floors, restoring the order that chaos had stolen. Each motion felt deliberate grounding. I wasn't erasing what happened, I was reclaiming what mattered. The afternoon light fell through the kitchen window, soft and gold. I poured tea into my old ceramic cup, the one with the faint crack near the rim. I ran my finger over it, tracing the floor like an old scar. Broken things can still serve, if treated with care. Outside, a hammer struck rhythmically. The caretaker I'd hired, Matteo, was fixing the greenhouse door. His whistle carried through the air, low and steady. It was the first music this place had heard in months. I stepped outside, watching as he tightened the hinges. The glass panes caught the sun reflecting light like a promise. He looked up. "Almost done, Mrs. Langford. You'll be able to open it again today." "Thank you," I said. "It's been closed too long." When he left, I stood inside the greenhouse alone. Dust motes swirled in the light like tiny galaxies. The scent of damp soil rose from the pots. Some of the plants had dyed their roots brittle and pale, but others, the resilient ones, had found ways to survive. Tiny green shoots pushing through forgotten earth. I crouched, brushing my fingers across the soil. It was dry at the surface, but cool beneath a live waiting. I watered each pot slowly, deliberately. Not out of habit, but out of respect. In the corner, I found Ben's old tool tray. Rust marked its edges, but the handles still fit my hands perfectly. He used to say, "Care is just another form of repair." I smiled, tightening the first screw on the window frame. By sunset, the greenhouse was glowing again. Moisture beaded on the glass, reflecting orange light into the dusk. The house hummed quietly behind me, locked safe, steady. Every piece was in its place. I returned to the porch with my tea and watched the horizon fade. Rain had begun, gentle and rhythmic, tapping against the leaves, the kind of rain that restores more than it erases. Somewhere beyond that curtain of grey, my son was driving home, carrying the weight of his own lesson. I didn't wish him suffering. I wished him growth. Forgiveness would come one day, the way rain always comes, not when summoned, but when the season turns. For now, I would tend to what was mine. The soil, the house, the life that still listened when I spoke gently. I stood locking the greenhouse for the night. The key turned smoothly, every system balanced, every route accounted for. The storm outside deepened, but inside the walls I'd rebuilt, the air was calm, steady, as the heart of the earth. The morning sun rose like a slow tide over the bay. Dew clung to the edges of the rosemary bushes, shining like glass beads. The soil smelled rich, again deep alive, forgiving. 6 months had passed since the courtroom, and the earth had healed faster than the people who walked it. I stood at the edge of the garden, hands tucked in my jacket pockets. Rows of seedlings stretched before me, lettuce, basil, tomatoes, beans. Each row had a name tag written in careful handwriting: Ava's Patch Luna's, Row Marisol's bed. The women tending them moved with quiet confidence. They were single mothers from town, each rebuilding her own soil. After a storm of a different kind, I had given them a piece of my land, the unused lower field, once Ben's test plot. Now it had purpose again. We called it the Langford Garden Project. Vivian's niece Grace ran the day-to-day work. She was 27, full of energy, with the same sharpness Vivian had in court, softened by sunlight and patience. She waved at me from the far end of the greenhouse. Mrs. Langford, the new compost bins arrived. Want to see? I smiled, walking toward her. Her hair was tied back with a red bandana, her gloves muddy. She reminded me of myself, years ago, determined, methodical, a little stubborn about perfection. The greenhouse buzzed with quiet industry. The women chatted as they mixed soil-weighed seeds, measured pH levels. I loved hearing their laughter. It filled the air with something better than apology. It sounded like repair. Grace pointed at a tray of saplings. These ones grew fast, she said. Too fast, I replied, touching the stem. The soil's too nitrogen heavy. Let's balance it next week. She nodded, jotting notes in her planner. You treat this place like a lab. It is, I said. Only the experiment is kindness. By noon the sun was high and the air shimmered above the fields. We took a break under the oak tree by the tool shed. Someone brewed mint tea. Someone else passed around homemade bread, simple rituals, the kind that root a community. Grace handed me the mail she'd picked up from town. Bill's donation letters and this. She held up a plain white envelope, unmarked, except for my name written in looping handwriting. No return address, no stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it. I turned it over. The paper was thick, expensive, not the kind used by gardeners or neighbors. I opened it carefully, sliding out a folded check. The number stopped me. $50,000. Made out to Langford Community Garden. The memo line read, "Lesson learned." For a moment I didn't breathe. Grace leaned closer. Is it from one of the donors? No, I said quietly. It's from someone who used to mistake ownership for privilege. Recognition hit me like sunlight breaking through fog. The handwriting, the phrasing. Melanie. I traced the ink with my thumb. Not anger, not triumph, something quieter. A circle closing in silence. Grace watched me, curious but respectful. Do you want me to record it for the foundation? Yes, I said. Mark it under education. She smiled. Education tuition, I corrected. She finally paid hers. Grace laughed softly, not understanding the full story, but sensing the weight beneath it. She tucked the check into the donation ledger and went back to the garden. I stayed under the oak tree, staring toward the ocean. The horizon shimmered in silver light. Waves rolled against the rocks in steady rhythm, the same rhythm that had carried me through every fight, every loss, every rebuild. The sea didn't forgive quickly, but it always returned what it owed, reshaped, softened, renewed. Maybe people weren't that different. I thought about Eric. He'd started calling once a month. Short conversations, polite, careful. He had moved inland working construction, now rebuilding houses for people who had lost them to floods. Maybe that was his form of restoration. He hadn't asked to come back. Neither had I invited him. But I could tell from his voice that he was learning what it meant to build something from scratch this time, with his own hands. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and basil. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed, one of the gardener's kids, chasing butterflies along the fence. The sound filled the space where bitterness used to live. I sat down on the bench Ben had built years ago from reclaimed wood. Its surface was worn smooth by time, but it held firm. He would have liked this, the order, the purpose, the quiet return of growth. I remembered his words from our first planting season. Every seed remembers the hand that planted it. Maybe that was true for people too. I took out my notebook, the same one I'd used during the investigation. Most of its pages were filled with evidence and case notes, but the last section was empty. I began a new entry project, Restoration Phase 4. Objective: cultivate growth from what once was conflict. Observation: soil improves when turned over. So do hearts. The pen moved slowly, steady as breath. Each line felt lighter than the last. Grace returned a few minutes later, holding a small pot. Thought you might want to plant this one yourself, she said. Inside was a young rosemary sprout, fresh green, fragrant. I smiled. The same variety I planted the first year, I said. She nodded. I read that in your notes. I knelt and pressed the soil aside with my hands. It was soft, dark, and ready. The roots slid in easily, finding space. When I covered them, the scent of earth rose around me, clean, hopeful. Grace asked, "Do you ever miss how things were before I shook my head?" No. The soil we started with was tired. This one breathes. The afternoon light turned golden, wrapping the greenhouse in amber glow. The women finished their rows, their laughter blending with the sound of the ocean. It felt like a pulse, one shared heartbeat between land and life. I brushed dirt from my gloves and stood. The wind lifted slightly, carrying the smell of salt and rosemary through the field. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting it settle. Healing never announces itself. It grows quietly beneath notice, until one day you realize the ground no longer feels heavy. I looked at the garden at Grace, at the women who would take these lessons and plant them elsewhere. Each of them was proof that resilience, like seeds, multiplies when shared. I walked back toward the porch, the envelope still on the bench behind me. For once, I didn't need to lock it away or frame it. It didn't symbolize debt anymore. It was simply balance. The tide rolled in as the sun began to lower, painting everything in soft orange. I whispered to the waves. She finally paid her tuition. And the sea, ever patient, seemed to answer with a single sound, a quiet, endless rhythm of return. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this story moved you, if it made you think about justice, family, or quiet strength, take a moment to let me know. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or state in the comments below. Your stories, your reflections, and your words mean more than you think. And if this story reminded you of someone strong in your life, a mother, a friend, a quiet fighter, share this video with them. Because sometimes healing begins with a story. Check the pinned comment below for a behind-the-scenes reflection and upcoming story teasers. Let's keep this conversation growing, one story, one truth, one heart at a time.